You likely believe your social anxiety is a wall standing between you and a meaningful relationship. You treat it like a medical condition, a persistent barrier that you have to somehow cure or fix before dating. This mindset is based on a psychological framework known as etiology. It is the belief that who you are today and what you are capable of doing right now is entirely dictated by your past experiences or your current emotional afflictions. The most famous architect of this model was Sigmund Freud. Under his framework, your anxiety is the undisputed cause, and isolation the inevitable effect. But the book, The Courage to be Disliked, challenges this entire worldview. It argues framing anxiety as a disease is a convenient excuse keeping you stuck. The book is based on the work of Austrian psychiatrist Alfred Adler. Adler completely rejected Freud's etiology. Instead, he proposed teleology, the theory that human behavior is not driven by past causes, but by present goals. Under Adler's model, your social anxiety isn't the reason you are lonely. Your anxiety is a subconscious tool you are actively manufacturing to achieve a hidden goal. To understand how this works, the book tells a story about a young woman who suffered from a chronic fear of blushing. Every time she was around a specific boy she liked, her face would turn bright red and she would freeze. She went to a philosopher for counseling, stating her dilemma clearly. She wanted to confess her feelings to this boy, but she convinced herself she could only do it after her blushing was completely cured. The philosopher refused to cure her. He diagnosed that the blushing wasn't a disease at all. She actually needed the symptom. She created the blushing to give herself a physical excuse to avoid the terrifying possibility that the boy might reject her. Look at this split-screen model comparing how you view your dating life again to the Adlerian reality. The standard view says your anxiety stops you from dating. The Adlerian view reveals that your true goal is to avoid rejection, and you are using social anxiety as the tool to achieve it. As long as you maintain that fear, you have a perfect, self-justifying shield. You get to live in the comfortable fantasy of, if only I wasn't so anxious, I could succeed, without putting your ego on the line. By waiting for your anxiety to magically disappear, you guarantee you will never be humiliated by a woman. But the trade-off for that absolute safety is a lifetime of isolation. If your anxiety is a tool for protection, you disarm it using Adler's core strategy for unwinding interpersonal friction. He calls it the separation of tasks. In any romantic scenario, your task has absolute boundaries. Your only job is to express authentic romantic interest and act honestly on your feelings. That is where your absolute control ends. How she reacts, whether she actually likes you or whether she bluntly rejects you, that is entirely her task. This flowchart separates the interaction exactly where it needs to be divided. On the left is everything you own. On the right is everything she owns. Paralyzing social anxiety happens right here, when you cross that boundary. You freeze because you are trying to manipulate or manage her task, obsessing over how she will evaluate you instead of just executing your own. The trade-off of adopting this mindset is extreme. You gain massive freedom from performance anxiety, but the cost is accepting absolute vulnerability to rejection. You cannot control what she thinks of you. You are terrified of dating because you are trying to manage an outcome you do not own. True confidence requires doing your task and completely dropping hers. This brings us to a secondary defense mechanism, the nice guy reflex. You try to be perfect, overly respectful, and universally liked by women, so you never experience any friction. Adler mandates that to actually be free, you must completely discard what he calls the desire for recognition. You have to stop trying to satisfy other people's expectations. Trying to please everyone is a massive contradiction. Swearing loyalty to the expectations of every woman you interact with requires you to constantly gauge their feelings. It causes internal paralysis and guarantees you will behave inauthentically. When you discard the desire for recognition, you project authentic confidence. But the strict trade-off is that expressing the real you will inevitably alienate certain people. If your overarching goal is to never be disliked by any woman, you are treating them as judges to appease, rather than equal human beings to connect with. Putting a romantic interest on a pedestal is what Adler calls a vertical relationship. You place yourself below her, constantly seeking her praise or validation. Adler's alternative requirement for happiness is building horizontal relationships. This means viewing all parties as equal comrades, completely regardless of status, wealth, or attractiveness. When you look at this hierarchy, it's obvious why vertical dynamics guarantee chronic anxiety. You are trapped in a loop of trying to prove your worth to a perceived superior. You have to flatten it out. But notice the trade-off. A person who steps onto this horizontal plane has to take full responsibility for themselves. You can no longer play the role of the helpless, anxious victim to garner pity or avoid taking action. Romance is impossible if you keep her on a pedestal. You cannot form a genuine connection with someone you are constantly looking up at in fear. Adler states a definitive, uncompromising truth. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. The only mathematical way to never get hurt is to live entirely alone in the universe. This quadrant chart maps out your options, forcing you to look at the true return on investment of your current behavior. Up here in the top left is Profile A, the optimizer. This person prioritizes never being judged, embarrassed, or rejected above all else. If you belong in this quadrant, your social anxiety isn't a failure. It is actually a highly successful strategy that is working perfectly to keep your ego completely safe. On the right is Profile B, the action taker. They still feel the high fear of rejection, but they deploy the separation of tasks anyway, because finding a partner is strictly more important to them than protecting their ego. If your stated desire to find a girlfriend truly outweighs your desire to protect your ego, your current strategy of waiting for a cure is a mathematical failure. You do not lack the competence, the charm, or the inherent worth to get a girlfriend. What you lack is the courage to be disliked. Being disliked or rejected is not a failure. It is objective proof that you are exercising freedom and living in accordance with your own principles. You have to stop waiting for the perfect, anxiety-free moment to arrive. It does not exist, and it is never coming. Stop trying to cure the blushing. Separate your tasks, accept the vulnerability, and start stepping forward with the blush firmly on your face.